This episode is brought to you by Logicalis and the 2025 IT News State of Security Report. Stay tuned until the end to hear from Lisa Forti, the Country General Manager at Logicalis, about how their managed XDR solution simplifies fragmented security stacks for CIOs. Hello and welcome to the IT News Podcast. I'm your host, Eleanor Dickinson. Our guest this fortnight is John Atkin, Commander of Digital Transformation and Reform at the Northern Territory Police Force. John reveals how he helped lead the rollout of SerPro, the force's long-overdue case management system, and guided broader efforts to modernising technology across Australia's most remote jurisdiction. At the heart of this transformation was a focus on frontline policing, ensuring that the tools developed truly met the needs of those using them on the ground. John, can you just start off by explaining your role as Commander for Digital Transformation, and can you just tell me how it fits more broadly within the IT structure at NT Police Force?
A number of years ago now, all of our IT services for the Northern Territory Government, as well as some corporate services, were centralised. So what we had as a Chief Information Officer group moved into an agency called the Department of Corporate and Digital Development, and they provide all the IT services to agencies like the Northern Territory Police Force. My role really came about through some work that we were doing, the replacement of our case management system, which ended up being a 5-year, $61 million program, SerPro. And where we found the gap really was we needed some additional work from inside to work on the people and the process components. The IT specialists were great at the technology bit, but didn't necessarily understand police business, and certainly didn't understand the processes that we were using. So what we call general orders and standard operating procedures, and what the impacts of the new system were going to do to that. So that program's a commercial off-the-shelf products, which meant that we did have to do quite a lot of change to our internal operating procedures. So that was really my focus. And then from there, it's expanded to a range of other projects. I have our National Firearms Register is another big one that sits with us. We've got electronic rostering and a few others. So it was originally digital transformation. It's now digital transformation and reform. The reform part came about because there was a bit of an idea that we could just plug the IT projects in and that our operating procedures were up to date and current, and they absolutely aren't always. So what we found was that quite often the way that our business units were operating wasn't exactly the way that our standard operating procedures were spelled out. And so what that really meant was we needed to avoid and make sure that our systems didn't just rely on the operating procedures to do all of their configuration. We actually needed to understand properly our as-is processes. We do a lot of work there to make sure that anything that we do is current, and that's the reform part.
Can you just tell me a little bit about how Northern Territory Police prioritises digital transformation and what kind of factors influence technology decision-making and technology purchasing?
Broadly, there's a Northern Territory Government digital roadmap, and that was part of the centralisation too, was to really have a look at what systems and tools were in use across government to make sure that we weren't necessarily procuring multiple tools and systems unnecessarily. Now, particularly in agencies like police and health, there are some very specialist things that need to be procured. Whilst a number of things are on that broader NTG digital roadmap, other things are pretty unique. And so my focus is really looking at operational efficiencies. We have a look at the life cycle of our different digital products and systems, see where they are in their life cycle. There are a number of things that need to be replaced just because they're at the end of life, and other things where we're looking towards the future to see what's coming next, and other things where we're spending some time to try and understand whether or not we could be using existing products and tools better. We're doing some what we call digital landscape work to understand what our landscape is like now. We've identified somewhere around, I think it's 250 different systems and tools that we're currently using within police, fire and emergency services. And then we go through a process of saying, who's the system owner, how are we supporting it, where it's at in its product and contract life cycle. That's part of the prioritization process, as well as things that come to us. There might be some initiatives that come out of government that mean that some things go up the ladder slightly. There's a number of different ways that things get prioritized, but from my perspective, I'm always really looking to see what is going to benefit the end users, i.e. the frontline cops.
You've got a very interesting career trajectory because you were a frontline cop for over 2 decades. How has that helped shape your role as now somebody in a technology leadership position? And maybe could you even tell us how you yourself fell into that?
Somewhat ironically, coming out of high school, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do, and I started doing some tertiary study in IT and very quickly decided I didn't want to be in an office doing IT. And then I thought I'd want to do something a bit more, what I thought was exciting, joined the police force, and 15, 16 years later, I ended up back in the technology space. So that's somewhat ironic. But I think for me, I ended up working on a number of projects. So frontline policing, I've worked in some of our specialist areas, worked in both regional and remote parts of the Northern Territory. I've worked in our professional standards area. I've worked in our HR. That's one of the things that I love about policing, is it offers you an opportunity to have multiple careers in one agency, and that's been absolutely fantastic. I did some work in projects a few years ago, and I was asked to look at the electronic rostering project from an end user's perspective. And really it was a request, hey, John, you've been responsible for managing a roster for a large number of remote police stations. We're going to look at introducing an electronic rostering product. Would you mind having a look and seeing if it would be suitable for the end users? Short answer was no. But really what that sort of did was that it took me into this space of projects. And then I was quietly back in frontline operational policing, and a deputy commissioner said, hey, would you mind having a look at SerPro? And I said, why? What's wrong with it? And he said, oh, we're just a bit worried about the time frame and things like that. And so I came in and I ended up there. And what he said would be 3 months has ended up being about 3.5 years.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about the SerPro system? Because a lot of other forces are already using it. Queensland has been using it for 20 years now, and you have been using it for 2 years. So I understand that the platform was implemented before, or was in the process of being implemented before you took on the role. Can you tell me what you found and how that's helped shape your idea of how you deliver projects, especially IT projects?
What we call SerPro is a product called Niche RMS. Niche RMS is a commercial off-the-shelf product, and it's specifically for a police core management system or core policing system. It's been used in Queensland Police for some time now. They call it Q Prime. South Australia also have the same product. They call it Shield. We call it SerPro, which is short for Serve and Protect. We've all had slightly different implementation models. For a variety of reasons, we selected a big bang approach. We're one of very few jurisdictions in the world who have implemented it that way. The project was a couple of years in when I was asked to come and have a look. And really the biggest challenge was, while the technology had definitely been done, it had been done in isolation. And certainly where we were seeing challenges was in end-to-end business processes. So looking at how a police officer would need to use the system from the moment, for example, a call came into our communications centre, we dispatch police out to a job, the police officers then attend the job, then they need to enter data into the system, and then that information then travels all the way down our justice continuum into the courts. And the different silos of pieces were working, but certainly from my perspective, it was not usable from that end-to-end perspective.
When you talk about silos, what was the main issue that police officers were saying this system isn't serving our needs?
So we hadn't gone live at that point. What I saw was that pieces of the system, so it's broken down into a number of different modules. So there's an investigations piece, there's a custody piece, there's a property management piece, and all of those had been done in their, as I described, silos, and each of those was working. But when you went to try and make one module go to the next module from a user perspective, it just didn't work. So that was the really big challenge. And one of the challenges we have, certainly in the territory, but I expect that other police jurisdictions will have it too, is the desire for police to be working in the front line and not necessarily working on projects. And so that's a bit of a challenge in and of itself, because you need that policing expertise in your technology and in your projects. But when the demand environment is really high, it can be really challenging to keep your police officers working on the projects, but it's just such a critical part. And the other big challenge that we had was, how do you implement a huge change? It was an absolute digital transformation in an agency that's working 24/7 across a huge, vast area, because you can't just take people away from their workplace for days or weeks on end and not lose service to the community. So that was a huge challenge for us as well. And we spent a lot of time planning how we would go about training people ready for that big bang.
Can you kind of describe the day when the big bang did come through after all the work you did over 2 years? How did you find that SerPro was received by the police force?
Turbulent is probably how I would describe it. We go through that benefits realisation sort of stuff around these projects, and sometimes I worry that we're asking the wrong question. So sometimes the question that was being asked of the police was, do you like it? And very few people are going to say that they like the systems that they use. Very few people say, hey, I love Word, I love Outlook. The bigger questions for me was, is it allowing you to do your job? Is it causing you pain points? Is it providing any efficiencies? And so those were the things that we were really focusing on. The go live, there was a cutover of a couple of days. We planned significantly for that. I think one of the things that I certainly learned from that is this idea that you can have a couple of months of hypercare is just an absolute fallacy in these huge transformational projects. We had a huge tail for that project that probably lasted at least 12 months. So we maintained a support team 24/7 for, I want to say it was about 3 or 4 months, and then we drew it down to 16 hours a day, and we've slowly been drawing it back since then. Some people were away when we ran the training, and they returned from leave and they've got a brand new case management system, and they need to arrest a person and then put them before the court, and they've got absolutely no idea what to do. We had to have that support around to be able to help them through that process. There were a whole bunch of tentacles that we just didn't understand at the time. It's impacted things like our crime statistics, and that made a lot of media at the time. We had to go through some explanation about the fact that we had a break in the data time series, which isn't a thing that people really understand. And so there was a lot of external and internal communication that we really had to navigate to try and just keep pushing through. What we definitely didn't have the capability to do after a period of time was roll back. Like, we had that as a plan in case it needed to happen, but the longer you go from the go live, the less likely you can roll back, because you've got all your new data in your new system, and trying to get that from your new system into your old system would have been really problematic. So it's been absolutely a journey. I think that things are definitely much better, and that's the question I ask some of the cops now when I see them is, I know that you probably are still challenged by some of it, but is it better today than it was on the 23rd of November 2023 when we went live? And the answer 99% of the time is yes. I sort of think of it as a bit of a bell curve. You've got the people at one end who are the early adopters, who love new things, and they're like, this is fantastic, particularly with our younger police force. And then you've got most of the people who are like, it is what it is, I'll get to know it. And then you've got the other end who are just like, this is really, really hard. There were even some people who were right near retirement who just said, I just don't want to have a bar of it. And we did know that was going to happen based on lessons learned from other jurisdictions rolling it out.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fascinating. You went from doing the SerPro rollout to taking on other digital transformation projects, and now it's your role. Did you find that you gained a little bit of an appetite for this kind of big transformation project work?
Yes, I think the big thing for me is I'm just really trying to focus on making things better for our cops and the people who support them. It is the demand environment for policing, certainly in the Northern Territory, but I think across Australia generally, has increased significantly, particularly post-COVID. I know that our demand through our 000 calls has gone up something like 50 or 60% on the last 5 years. To be perfectly frank, I am really yet to see pieces of technology be implemented into policing that really drive efficiencies. There's always a cost somewhere. Quite often you're redistributing effort from one part of the agency to the other. So even when you find efficiencies for frontline cops, you're usually pushing something to a back end. That is really challenging too, for us to do some analysis on where the effort gets redistributed to. And it's actually easier for us to make an argument for more police officers, particularly in the demand environment we're in. Really challenging for us to get additional support and back end, like additional public servants, etc., to do some of the system support. I definitely enjoyed it, and I'm always approaching it from the perspective of what is going to make life easier for our front end.
The Northern Territory is essentially a big remote area of a sparsely distributed population. So how does that affect a big change management and technology project? And then, of course, that filtering down to beyond the end users, to the community that you serve.
A lot of planning and preparation, certainly for that one. We did a hub and spoke training model, and that was by setting up training hubs in our larger regional locations, and people from the remote places would come in for training. Some of our larger remote stations, we did send trainers out there. And that continued past go live. We had to continue to provide that training to pick up some of the people who hadn't been trained, and also to provide support for people who were still struggling. So that's part of that hypercare. And that was one of the challenges from hypercare, was the same people that were providing the hypercare around answering the phones were the same people who needed to do the tech configuration fixes, because there's always little bugs, with the same people who needed to deliver training for people who had missed out on the training. The other thing that we used was champions. So we identified a relatively large cohort of champions who we trained up as trainers, who delivered a lot of the training, but then went back to the workplace, and they was a go-to person that if others needed help. We were also helped by the fact that we do have a relatively steady stream of recruitment at the moment. And what that has meant is once we got about 6 months in from the implementation, the go live, people were coming into the workplace, 30 odd people at a time were coming into the workforce, and all they knew was the new system. So they essentially were becoming our super users too. That was all they'd been trained in. They didn't have the legacy knowledge that others had. So there's a number of things that kind of lined up for us that helped.
Looking at the wider picture of Northern Territory Police, where would you say you are at the moment on their digital transformation roadmap?
We engage consistently with other police jurisdictions. I sit on a group called the Australian New Zealand Police Advisory Agency, or ANSPA, Chief Information Officer Group. And so we're talking pretty regularly about where we are. And for some things we are ahead, and for some things we are behind. And so sort of seeing where you are, we're all kind of going in the same direction, but we might be in slightly different lanes and in slightly different parts of the highway. One of the biggest challenges for policing, but I would say for public sector generally, is the challenge of technology for your work purposes being fast outstripped by your personal technology. You have to go through very rigorous procurement processes, implementation processes. Everyone's got legacy systems that it can be very difficult to integrate with. And so what I see happening now is between my personal technology and my work technology is getting bigger and bigger at a faster and faster rate. And that's causing us some angst around things like data, people using their personal devices instead of their work devices to undertake work tasks. I see that not just in policing, but across the public sector generally. And so from that perspective, I suppose it's really just having a look to see where those key things are and what it is that we need to do or how we need to change ourselves to keep up with that. From a digital roadmap perspective, I'll be honest, sometimes for me, technology is not the answer. Sometimes it's actually just refining a process. And sometimes I worry that we actually implement a technology solution when we didn't need one in the first place. All we actually needed to do was tweak some of the configurations or settings or policy around the way we were using something we already had.
How do you ensure that you are resourcing effectively, both in terms of your skills and sourcing technology? Because on the one hand, you have the procurement process, but you also have budgetary constraints.
Budgetary constraints is definitely a big one, and I think that's pretty consistent again across Australia at this point in time, certainly for police forces, and certainly the Northern Territory Police Force. That is something that we have been making sure that we address. I think from an upskilling perspective, that's something that we've been looking at, is how do we take a police officer and bring them in and get them to contribute to what it is that we need them to do. We basically turn them into what we call subject matter representatives. I think the big thing for me is to try and not make them something that they're not. They're not necessarily a project manager. They're not necessarily some kind of technical expert, although we do have some of those people in our police force because of prior careers that they've had. But what I'm trying to get out of the police on our projects is their policing experience and their policing knowledge. And it's the same for me. I'm not trying to pretend to be a technology expert. I'm certainly there to look at the user-centric component to make sure that whatever we implement is used by the end user. And so I rely heavily on the tech experts to actually do that bit. We've got that digital landscape work that's been going on to see where we are right now, and that will look at where we're going to go in the future. One of the things that I've adopted in the Northern Territory, and some of the other police jurisdictions have it, other jurisdictions have what they call a reserve police force, and quite often that's people at the end of their policing career who still want to contribute to policing, public safety in the community, but don't necessarily want to do it from a uniform anymore. And they can be re-employed to work on projects and things like that, and it's their policing expertise. I've done a similar thing in the Territory where we have engaged a number of former police officers as daily rate contractors, and that helps us from that perspective of they're known by the organisation. The training is really well received. They speak the right language. Quite often they know the people they're delivering the training to. And certainly that made a huge change or a huge positive impact on when we have done our different implementations, having the training delivered by people who understand exactly what the end users want and need. And as I say, speak the terminology and all that. That's made a big difference.
What's next for you then for the rest of 2025? What's the next item on the agenda?
So with the next item on the agenda for the police from a technology perspective is we are looking at implementation of electronic rostering. We went live with fire and emergency services with that last year. They've got a slightly different use case than police. The fire rosters particularly are pretty well set. They generally know and can predict. They work a 4 on 4 off. They know what they're going to work in 6 months, 6 years, as long as their watch doesn't change. For police officers, their rosters can change multiple times a day. And so slightly different use case. So that's something that's the next thing to go live with will be electronic rostering. The other large project for us is the National Firearms Register, and each of the police jurisdictions is working on that. And I'm happy to say that Northern Territory Police are leading the way on that one. We are certainly at the front of the National Firearms Register, and that's a really exciting piece of work, obviously led by tragedy, but the outcomes for that will be greater public safety for it.
And finally, what kind of career advice would you give to anybody in your position who is perhaps in emergency services or wants to get out of a boots on the ground role into a more technical project-based role? What advice would you give?
One of the things I have absolutely loved about my policing career is the diversity, and there are a lot of different ways that police officers can specialise, whether it's in forensics or in our police tactical areas, or whether it's in assets forfeiture, money laundering, training people at our training college. And the technology one's just another one that's come up more recently. One of the things I just encourage people to do is when they get a moment to breathe, have a think about where they might want to be in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. Have the conversations with your supervisors to see what the opportunities are. Don't be afraid to ask the questions and do a little bit of career planning and have a think about where you might want to get to. One of the things that I think sometimes, because we get so bogged down in just the operational response, is all of a sudden you blink and you're 5 years down and all you've done is your 24/7 operational response. So really trying to find the time to have a think and be a bit deliberate about some of the decisions you make. And I think as an organisation, certainly one of the things we are working on is some of that workforce planning and career pathway stuff so that we can help our people do that as well. But I think it's a two-way street, right? People need to identify what it is that they're passionate about, and sometimes that also includes doing something for yourself. And then obviously the organisation, making sure that where we can facilitate that growth and development.
And perhaps, you didn't need to have done an IT degree before you joined.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. As I've said to a number of people in the police force, when they come into some of these things, their expertise is their policing. That's what they bring to their roles. They don't have to go out and become really technical PMs. We can get that skill set in. It's how we use the technology to do our job. That's where they can really contribute.
And it's a great note to end on. So thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
In today's increasingly complex information security environment, new threats and attackers appear regularly. That can leave security teams feeling that they are caught in an ongoing game of whack-a-mole as they try to detect and respond to new attack vectors. That leads to fragmentation in their security strategy, resulting in increased complexity at a time when the volume of data they must process is exponentially increasing, while finding skilled professionals is increasingly difficult. Extended Detection and Response, or XDR, can help, but as Lisa Forti, the Country General Manager for Logicalis in Australia, says, organisations need to take a strategic approach and avoid fragmentation.
When we look at fragmentation, that really stems from organisations investing in multiple point solutions across endpoint, cloud, network and identity without really any sort of cohesive integration. And the result from this is that data is siloed and there is a lack of end-to-end visibility across the environment. With alert fatigue, this is another major concern. So many XDR tools are flooded and with security alerts. So this leads to burnout and often missed incidents. And finally, the lack of skilled cyber professionals is a really persistent issue. Our 2025 CIO report shows a significant number of CIOs across Asia-Pac are really struggling to find and retain the right talent.
While these challenges are understood, Lisa says there are barriers to adopting solutions.
Many organisations simply don't have the people or the budget to stand up a 24/7 security operations centre. And even when they do, attracting and keeping that cyber talent in today's market is incredibly tough. The complexity of integration, so getting that XDR to work properly means you've got to integrate it with, telemetry across cloud, endpoints, apps, identities, and more. And then finally, really it's the disconnect between IT and business priorities. So a really big theme in our CIO report was that 60% of CIOs feel their security programs aren't fully aligned with business outcomes.
Overcoming these challenges can't be fixed by taking a piecemeal approach, as Lisa explains.
A truly effective XDR solution needs more than just technology. You need end-to-end visibility across the entire digital estate, from endpoints and networks to cloud and identity systems, to be able to eliminate all of the blind spots. Automated detection and response so that threats can be contained in real time and not in hours or days later. And then AI-driven analytics that really cut through the noise and surface what really matters. And importantly, business-aligned insights. So executives can understand the risk and context and make, those really informed decisions. So ultimately, it's about the convergence of the right platform, people and processes to deliver those measurable security outcomes.
There are many challenges in building an effective XDR platform. A managed XDR solution can help businesses by bringing the technology, people, and other resources together.
At Logicalis, we've designed our managed XDR solution to really help customers tackle these challenges head on. It consolidates the security visibility across endpoints, networks, cloud workloads, identity and applications. We leverage industry-leading vendor offerings such as Microsoft Sentinel and Defender in a really tightly integrated, automated way. It helps reduce the alert fatigue through intelligent correlation and contextual enrichment. So our analysts focus on high priority threats, not the noise. We also provide 24/7 coverage via our global security operations centres, staffed by certified threat hunters and cyber experts who investigate and respond on our customers' behalf. We translate technical data into risk-based insights that CIOs can use to brief their board. So by integrating natively with Microsoft and Cisco ecosystems, wrapping it in expert guidance and service, we're helping our customers move away from a patchwork of tools towards a more streamlined, proactive approach to security.
Assembling and integrating all the pieces required to build a comprehensive XDR solution is time and resource intensive. Today's business world requires security to be able to detect and respond in real time, and that demands XDR platforms that can detect threats and respond across a wide range of technical environments and platforms. Logicalis Managed XDR platform alleviates the challenges of integrating different technical solutions and finding the resources you need to protect your valuable information assets.
That's the episode of this fortnight. Stay tuned for the next episode. And for all the latest headlines and happenings in Australian technology news, head over to itnews.com.au.